The evening light outside the hotel was soft and calm as a man walked in through the glass doors. He moved slowly, as if he had been walking for a long time. His clothes were simple and a little old, and he carried a small worn bag that looked like it had been with him for many years. He did not look like someone people would usually notice, and no one in the busy lobby paid attention to him at first. Guests were checking in and checking out. Some were talking on their phones, and some were waiting at the counter with tired faces. A group of tourists were laughing loudly near the entrance, and a family was taking pictures by the large fountain in the center of the lobby. The man looked around for a moment and then quietly sat down on a sofa in the corner. He placed his bag beside him and kept his hands on his knees. He did not talk to anyone. He did not look at anyone. He simply sat there as if he had come to rest for a few minutes. The hotel lobby was warm and bright, and soft music played from hidden speakers on the ceiling. The man listened for a bit and then looked toward the grand piano standing near the reception desk. It was a shiny black piano with clean white keys. Many people passed by it every day, but only a few ever touched it. The piano was there for guests who wanted to play a song or two, but most of them were too shy or too busy. The man watched it for a long moment. There was a quiet look in his eyes, like he was thinking about something important. The noise around him slowly faded as he focused on the piano. Outside, the sky grew darker, and the soft sound of gentle rain began to tap against the glass doors. The sound blended with the lobby noise and created a peaceful mix. People came and went, but the man stayed in the same spot. After several minutes, he finally stood up. His movements were slow, almost careful, as if he was carrying a story that no one else could see. He lifted his small bag and kept it close to his side. Then he walked toward the piano. A few people near the reception desk looked at him with small glances. They wondered if he was allowed to play it, or if he was just wandering around. He did not seem like a guest, but no one stopped him. When he reached the piano, he placed his bag on the floor beside the bench. He touched the edge of the piano gently, almost with respect, then pulled the bench slightly backward and sat down. Some guests turned their heads to see what he was doing. A man in a suit whispered to his wife that the stranger might not know how to play. A child held her mother's hand and pointed at the piano, waiting to hear something. The man took a deep breath, and as he lifted his hands, something changed. His fingers were thin but steady, and the way he hovered them above the keys made it clear that this moment meant something to him. He closed his eyes and let his fingers fall onto the keys, pressing the first note. The sound was soft, deep, and warm. It was not the sound of someone who was just testing the piano. It was the sound of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The note floated across the lobby, and a few people paused mid-step. Then he played another note, and then another, and soon a gentle melody began to form. The lobby, once filled with noise and movement, slowly grew quiet. People turned their heads, surprised by the beauty of the sound coming from the piano. The man continued to play, and each note seemed to carry feelings that words could not express. His fingers moved smoothly over the keys, and the melody grew richer. The guests near him stopped talking. The man in the suit slowly lowered his phone. The child who pointed at the piano walked closer with wide eyes. A group of friends who had been laughing near the elevator grew silent as they listened. Even the hotel staff at the reception desk looked up from their screens. The man did not look at anyone. His eyes stayed closed, and he leaned slightly forward as if the music was pulling something deep from inside him. The melody rose and fell like waves, carrying a quiet sadness and gentle peace at the same time. A waiter carrying a tray slowed down, afraid to make noise. A woman who was writing something on her laptop stopped typing mid-sentence. A man who had been angry about his room bill turned around and forgot why he was upset. The music wrapped the entire lobby like a warm blanket. The rain outside grew stronger, and its soft sound mixed with the piano notes in a way that made the moment feel almost unreal. The man continued to play, and people gathered around him without speaking a word. Everyone felt something, but could not explain what it was. Some felt calm. Some felt emotional. Some felt like they were remembering something from long ago. The man's expression remained quiet and calm, yet the music he created was full of life. His hands moved faster at times, and at other times they slowed down, letting each note breathe. The melody did not sound like something a beginner would play. It sounded like something only someone who had lived many experiences could create. A few guests took out their phones and started recording the moment. They wanted to capture the beauty of the music, even though they did not know who the man was. A hotel employee whispered to another that they had never heard anyone play like that in the lobby before. The employee nodded quietly, still watching with wide eyes. The man kept playing, completely lost in his world of music. He did not smile. He did not show any signs of emotion on his face. But the sound from the piano told a different story. It told a story of someone who had once known great joy and deep sorrow. Someone who had walked through life with heavy memories. Someone who had loved something deeply and maybe lost it. The crowd grew bigger as more people came in from outside. Some guests stepped out of the elevator and paused, confused about why everyone was gathered around the piano. But as soon as they heard the music, they understood why. A man wearing headphones removed them to listen. A woman who had been crying earlier wiped her tears and walked toward the sound, drawn to it without knowing why. The music touched everyone differently, but it touched everyone. The hotel manager walked out of his office when he noticed the crowd forming. He walked toward the piano, trying to understand what was happening. When he saw the man playing, he slowed down. For a moment, even he forgot he was supposed to manage anything. He simply watched like everyone else. The man played as if he had been waiting for this moment for a long time. As if the piano was not just an instrument, but a doorway to something that he had kept locked in his heart. The melody became softer, filled with a gentle sadness that made people lean in closer. No one knew the man. No one knew his past. No one knew why he chose this moment, this piano, this lobby. But the music made everyone feel like they knew him a little. The man finished the piece with a long, slow note. He let it linger in the air until it faded into the sound of rain. The lobby remained silent for a few seconds. People held their breath without even realizing it. The man slowly lowered his hands from the keys. He opened his eyes and looked at the piano, not at the people. He looked tired but peaceful, as if playing had lifted something heavy from his chest. No one clapped yet. They were still lost in the moment. The man placed his fingers back on the keys as if he was ready to play again. And the crowd waited, ready to listen to whatever story he would tell next without using a single word. The piano in the lobby seemed to take a life of its own as the man began to play again. This time, the notes were stronger, clearer, and more confident. His fingers moved over the keys like they were an extension of his body, and each sound he created filled the room with an unusual energy. People who had been standing still started to lean closer, their faces showing curiosity and wonder. Even those who had been walking through the lobby slowly stopped, unable to look away from the mysterious figure at the piano. The man's eyes were closed, and he seemed unaware of the audience around him. It was not that he ignored them, but rather that he was completely immersed in the music. Every note he played felt intentional, like a conversation between his heart and the piano. Some of the guests began whispering to each other, wondering how someone dressed so simply could play so well. One woman, holding her child, whispered that she had never heard music like this in her life. Another man, who had been reading on his phone, put it down and stared at the pianist, unable to believe what he was hearing. The sound of the piano was soft yet powerful, carrying a gentle sadness that made people remember things they had long forgotten. A few people had tears in their eyes. They did not know why, but the music touched something deep inside them. The child by the fountain stopped moving and stared at the man as if trying to understand who he was. The rain outside added a quiet rhythm to the scene, tapping gently against the glass doors, blending with the music in a way that made the moment feel magical. The man played a melody that was both lively and calm, changing pace without any hesitation. His hands moved effortlessly, gliding across the keys with an elegance that made it impossible to look away. Even the hotel staff, who had seen many talented people, could not hide their amazement. Some quietly stepped aside to watch more closely, while others stood near the edge of the crowd, afraid to intrude but unable to leave. As the music continued, the atmosphere in the lobby changed. The ordinary sounds of a hotel, the phones ringing, the elevators dinging, the chatter of guests seemed to fade into the background. All attention was on the man and the piano. The melody told a story, though no one could put it into words. Some felt the warmth of happiness, others felt a hint of loss, and some simply felt peace. A few guests pulled out their phones and quietly recorded the performance, knowing that what they were witnessing was something rare, something special that they might never see again. The man did not look at the cameras or the audience. He did not try to impress anyone. He played as if the piano itself was a friend, and the music was the only language he needed. Every now and then he would lift his head slightly, take a small breath, and then let his fingers continue their dance. The melodies became more complex, yet they never lost their softness. It was clear to anyone listening that this was someone who had spent years learning and mastering his craft. The man seemed to be telling a story through the music, a story that had no words, but was full of emotion. Some guests leaned on the backs of chairs, letting the sound wash over them. Others closed their eyes and simply listened, feeling the music move through them. A few older guests whispered to each other, recognizing some of the melodies as songs they had heard long ago, songs that had faded from memory until this moment. The sound was beautiful, but it was also personal, like the man was sharing a part of his life with everyone in the room. The piano notes carried the weight of experience, of joy, of heartbreak, of hope. A small group of musicians who happened to be staying at the hotel quietly gathered nearby, astonished at the technique and emotion in each movement. They whispered to each other, sharing glances of disbelief. How could someone play like that without a spotlight, without an audience, without fame? The man's fingers moved faster now, creating a flurry of sound that still felt controlled and purposeful. It was almost as if he was racing against something unseen, or perhaps he was racing against time itself. Guests could feel the intensity building, yet it was never overwhelming. Instead, it drew everyone closer to the music, making them feel part of something larger than themselves. A few employees peeked from behind the counters, afraid to interrupt, but unable to resist the pull of the performance. Even the bellhop, who was carrying luggage, paused for a moment, balancing the bags carefully while listening to the story being told by the piano. The man's face remained calm, but his hands and the music revealed everything he could not say. Each chord seemed to carry years of experience, moments of laughter and sorrow, memories of people and places, and the essence of his own journey. Guests whispered quietly to each other, feeling connected to the emotion of the moment. A woman, sitting with her husband, whispered that she felt as if the music was speaking directly to her. Her husband nodded, unable to find words. The piano continued to sing under the man's hands, rising and falling with a natural rhythm. The melody flowed like a river, smooth in some parts and rushing in others. Each change in pace brought a new emotion, a new feeling, a new chapter in the story. People in the lobby felt their hearts beating in time with the music. They forgot about their worries, their appointments, and their daily routines. In that moment, the only thing that mattered was the sound of the piano and the man who played it. The man's eyes stayed closed for most of the performance, but occasionally he would glance at the keys or slightly shift his posture as if acknowledging the life of each note. His connection to the piano was deep, and it seemed as though the instrument was an extension of his own body. People who had never played an instrument could feel the skill and the care in every movement. Some guests began to feel a strange sense of recognition, though they could not place where they had seen the man before. His presence was calm but commanding. The way he played suggested he had once been someone who had stood in front of large audiences. Yet now he had chosen a quiet life, sharing his gift without expectation. The music continued to captivate everyone. Some people were moved to tears. Some smiled softly. Some simply sat entranced, as if afraid to blink and miss a moment. The man played slowly, deliberately, creating pauses and silences that were just as important as the notes themselves. Those pauses allowed the audience to breathe, to feel, and to reflect on what they were hearing. The crowd around him grew, but it was a silent crowd, respectful of the story unfolding through sound. The rain outside intensified, tapping a soft rhythm against the windows. It added a layer of tranquility to the scene, making it seem as if the world outside had paused to listen too. A child who had been running around earlier now sat cross-legged on the floor, staring at the piano, completely absorbed. The man did not notice the audience anymore. His focus was entirely on the music, as if each note was a word and each melody was a sentence. He played with patience, with passion, and with purpose. It was a performance unlike anything the guests had expected. Some guests tried to identify the songs he played, recognizing fragments of old tunes from their past. Others simply let the music wash over them, without analyzing, without questioning, without interruption. A few people whispered to their friends that the man must be a professional, perhaps a famous pianist who had chosen to play in public anonymously. The idea seemed strange, but it felt right. The skill, the emotion, and the depth of the music were far beyond ordinary. The man's hands moved with such precision and confidence that it seemed impossible for him not to be a professional. Yet his simple clothes, his quiet demeanor, and his humble presence made it difficult for anyone to believe he had once been in the spotlight. The music continued, carrying everyone through highs and lows, moments of joy and moments of reflection. It was a gift to the people in the lobby, an unexpected experience that would remain with them forever. Some people dared to lean closer, hoping to catch every detail of the performance. Others stayed at a distance, feeling the power of the sound without intruding. The man played without pause, without concern for time, and without acknowledging the crowd. He was in his own world, and everyone else was lucky enough to be invited in for a while. The melody became richer, more complex, and even more emotional. Some guests held their breath, feeling the music resonate with their own lives. A few people quietly wiped tears from their eyes, feeling touched by something they could not explain. The piano sang under the man's hands, and the story of his life seemed to unfold in secret, reaching each listener in a personal way. The man finally paused, letting a single note linger in the air. It was soft, delicate, and filled with a quiet strength. The note hung in the lobby, drawing everyone's attention before it slowly faded into silence. For a moment, no one moved. The sound of the rain outside was all that could be heard, mixing with the echo of the final note. The man opened his eyes slowly and looked down at the piano keys. He leaned back slightly, taking a quiet breath. There was a sense of completion, as if he had shared a part of himself without saying a word. The people in the lobby stayed silent, unsure whether to applaud or remain quiet. They were not just witnessing a performance. They were experiencing a story, a memory, a feeling. The man's music had touched something in all of them, something they would carry long after they left the hotel. Then slowly, as if feeling the gentle encouragement of the crowd, he lifted his hands above the keys once more. The soft lighting in the lobby seemed to follow him, highlighting his presence as he prepared to continue. People leaned forward, waiting for the next chapter of the story that was being told, not with words, but with music. The mysterious man at the piano had captured their attention, their hearts, and their imaginations, and they could not look away. And in that quiet moment, the entire lobby seemed to exist only for the music and the man who played it. The lobby grew quieter as more people gathered around the piano, drawn by the sound that seemed to reach deep into their hearts. The man at the piano continued to play with quiet confidence, each note deliberate and full of meaning. Guests who had been passing by now stopped completely, their attention captured. Even the hotel staff, who were used to the usual noise of a busy evening, were unable to look away. The soft murmur of conversations faded into a respectful silence, replaced by the music that told a story without words. Some people whispered to their companions, guessing that the man must be a professional pianist. Others wondered why someone so skilled would be playing in a hotel lobby, dressed so simply and appearing so unassuming. A few children sat cross-legged on the floor, unable to resist the beauty of the music, while their parents watched quietly from nearby. The man's hands moved with precision and emotion, drawing a melody that was both complex and comforting. Each note seemed to tell a story of its own, a tale of experiences lived, moments lost, and memories cherished. Guests began to sense that this performance was different from anything they had witnessed before. It was not just skill. It was emotion, history, and presence wrapped into a single moment. One woman, holding her child, whispered to a friend that she felt as though the music was speaking directly to her. Another man, who had been checking his phone, lowered it slowly and watched, mesmerized by the movement of the pianist's fingers and the way the music filled the space. The piano carried notes that were soft and gentle at times, then grew strong and urgent at others. It was as if the man was telling a story of life itself, sharing pieces of joy, sorrow, hope, and longing with every chord. The audience could feel the emotion without needing to understand exactly why. The hotel manager stepped out from his office, drawn by the unusual silence that had fallen over the lobby. He paused near the crowd, curious and amazed. He had seen many talented musicians over the years, but there was something different about this man. The way he played was intimate yet commanding, personal yet universal. It was impossible not to be affected. The rain outside had slowed to a gentle drizzle, but its rhythmic tapping against the windows added to the ambience. The music intertwined with the rain, creating a harmony that seemed almost magical. Guests who had come in for other reasons found themselves captivated, forgetting their plans and concerns. A young man sitting near the reception desk whispered to his companion that he had never heard anyone play like this in his life. The companion nodded, her eyes fixed on the pianist, unable to blink for fear of missing a single moment. The crowd slowly grew, yet it was not a chaotic gathering. People moved closer silently, giving each other space, careful not to disturb the flow of the music. Some took out their phones to record the performance discreetly, knowing that they were witnessing something rare and beautiful. The man's expression remained calm, but his fingers revealed everything he could not say. Each movement of his hands told a story. Each chord carried emotion that words could not capture. Guests felt connected to something larger than themselves, something timeless. The melodies moved seamlessly, shifting from soft, reflective passages to lively, energetic bursts. It was as if the man was speaking a language only he and the piano fully understood, yet everyone listening felt included. Some older guests whispered to each other, recognizing pieces of music from long ago, songs that had faded from memory until now. Others, younger and unfamiliar with classical melodies, were entranced by the sheer beauty and emotion of the performance. Even those who were usually impatient or hurried found themselves pausing, letting the music take them away from their daily concerns. The man played without stopping, without needing acknowledgement, without regard for applause. He was lost in the music, and everyone else was privileged enough to witness it. A small group of musicians staying at the hotel gathered quietly, amazed at the technique and expression displayed. They whispered among themselves, unable to believe that someone could play with such skill without even appearing to seek attention. The man's movements were fluid, natural, and precise. It was clear that he had spent years mastering his craft, yet there was no arrogance in his demeanor. He played with humility and grace, as if the piano were a friend and the music a conversation. Some guests began to feel emotions that they could not explain. Memories of lost loved ones, happy moments from childhood, and times of struggle all seemed to surface as they listened. Tears appeared in the eyes of a few people, yet they did not move or make a sound, afraid to break the spell. The child who had been watching the piano earlier now leaned forward, fascinated by the way the man's fingers moved across the keys. His mother smiled quietly, letting him absorb the experience without interruption. A young couple holding hands watched in silence, feeling the music touch parts of their hearts that words could not reach. The man continued to play, and the melody grew more intricate and layered. Each note was carefully placed, creating a balance of sound and silence that held the audience in rapt attention. Some people whispered guesses about who the man might be. Could he be a famous pianist traveling incognito? Was he a teacher, a composer, or someone who had once performed on large stages? No one could be certain, but everyone felt that they were witnessing a rare talent. The music rose and fell like the tide, drawing people in deeper with each phrase. The piano sang under his hands, telling stories of joy and sorrow, of hope and regret, of love lost and found. It was a story that had no beginning or end, yet everyone in the lobby understood it. The man's eyes occasionally lifted, meeting the piano keys, but never the audience. He did not seek approval or recognition. He played for the music itself, and the music reached every person present. Some guests closed their eyes, letting the sound wash over them. Others leaned closer, trying to catch every detail. The air in the lobby was thick with emotion, yet it was a calm, peaceful atmosphere. The man's fingers moved faster now, creating a flurry of notes that still felt deliberate and controlled. The energy in the room shifted, as if everyone had been pulled into the music, each heartbeat synchronized with the rhythm. The piano carried a warmth that spread to everyone listening, a warmth that felt like a shared secret, a private moment that belonged to no one and yet to everyone. Guests whispered softly to each other, unable to contain their amazement. They did not speak of the man himself, but of the feeling his music evoked. A woman whispered that she had never felt anything like it, while a man nodded silently, tears in his eyes. The music continued, flowing effortlessly from soft, gentle notes to louder, more passionate chords. The piano seemed to breathe under the man's hands, alive with life and emotion. The audience was captivated, unable to think about anything else. The man finally slowed the pace, letting the final notes linger in the air like a soft echo. The lobby was silent for a moment, the only sound being the gentle patter of rain outside. Then, almost instinctively, some guests clapped softly, unsure if applause was appropriate. Others remained still, wanting to hold on to the magic a little longer. The man lowered his hands from the keys, taking a deep, quiet breath. His eyes opened fully, revealing a calm, focused expression. The people around him waited, not wanting to break the connection that had formed. The music had touched each person in a personal way, leaving an impression they would never forget. Some guests whispered to their companions that this performance felt like a gift, something rare and precious. The man sat quietly, letting the silence fill the room. His presence was unassuming, yet the power of his music lingered in the air. People continued to watch, drawn to him, drawn to the piano, drawn to the story he had just shared without speaking a single word. It was clear that whoever this man was, he was not ordinary. He had a skill, a depth, and a quiet strength that commanded attention without demanding it. Guests began to exchange glances, some wondering if anyone else had recognized him. Others simply admired the beauty and emotion he had brought into the lobby. The child on the floor clapped softly, breaking the silence, and the audience smiled, some joining in gently. The man gave a slight nod, acknowledging the small applause, but he did not speak or draw attention to himself. He remained focused on the piano, ready to continue if the music called him. The lobby had transformed into a place of shared experience, where strangers were connected through sound and emotion. The music had changed the atmosphere, creating a moment of unity and reflection. Even the hotel staff felt the shift, as if something extraordinary had occurred. Guests whispered quietly, some commenting on the skill, others on the feeling the performance evoked. No one knew who the man was, but everyone felt the impact of his presence. The rain outside had stopped, leaving a fresh, cool scent in the air. Yet inside, the warmth of the piano music lingered. The man's hands hovered above the keys for a moment, then began a new melody. The audience leaned in, ready for the next chapter, knowing that each note would carry them further into the story he was telling. And so, the man continued to play, lost in the music. And the people of the lobby were lost with him, captivated by a performance they would remember forever. The piano continued to sing under the man's fingers, and the atmosphere in the lobby became almost magical. The music carried layers of emotion, moving the audience in ways words could never capture. People remained silent, drawn in by the story unfolding through the notes. Some guests whispered to each other, unsure if they should disturb the performance with conversation, while others simply watched in quiet awe. The man's hands moved with elegance, gliding across the keys in a rhythm that was both smooth and powerful. It was as if every chord, every pause, every note had been carefully chosen to tell the story only he fully understood. Occasionally, he would close his eyes and let his fingers speak for him. Guests who had been skeptical about his skill now began to recognize that this was no ordinary pianist. The depth of emotion in his playing suggested someone who had experienced both joy and hardship, someone who had poured life itself into music. A few older guests began to whisper that the melody reminded them of songs from the past, familiar yet distant, evoking memories they thought they had forgotten. A young woman held her child close, letting the music wash over them both. She did not understand why she felt such a strong connection, but the emotions tugged at her heart nonetheless. Some people had stopped recording on their phones, realizing that no recording could truly capture what was happening in the lobby. The man played as if the piano were an extension of his soul, each note revealing a fragment of his life. Every melody an expression of experiences lived quietly, away from the public eye. The hotel manager, who had been observing quietly, began to feel a sense of awe. He had seen many talented musicians over the years, but there was something different about this man. The performance carried sincerity, humility, and a depth that seemed to transcend time. People whispered guesses about the pianist's identity. Some suggested he might be a famous musician traveling incognito. Others speculated that he could be a teacher or composer who had chosen to perform in private. A few brave guests moved closer, trying to see his face clearly, hoping for some hint of recognition, while others stayed back, savoring the moment quietly. The music shifted, growing more intense and complex. Fast, lively notes danced across the keys, followed by soft, lingering tones that made listeners hold their breath. It was like a conversation, a journey that the man guided everyone through without saying a word. The audience felt emotions that were deeply personal. Some remembered lost friends or loved ones. Some recalled happy moments from their past. And some felt a quiet longing they could not name. The man's expression remained calm, but the passion in his hands revealed the depth of feeling in the music. Each note seemed intentional, purposeful, and full of meaning. A few musicians staying at the hotel watched from the edges of the crowd, whispering in disbelief. They admired the technical skill, the emotion, and the control, yet they also sensed something intangible, a connection to something beyond the notes themselves. The piano sang, carrying a rhythm that seemed to mirror the beating of the audience's hearts. People instinctively leaned in, some closing their eyes to feel the sound more deeply, others simply standing still, letting the music touch them. Even the children who had been restless earlier were now quiet, absorbed in the melodies. The man continued, flowing effortlessly from soft, reflective passages to powerful, dramatic ones. Every pause, every sustained note, every sudden movement of his hands told a story, weaving together experiences, emotions, and memories into a tapestry of sound. Guests began to feel that the performance was more than music. It was an unspoken story of someone's life. The way the man played suggested he had once been in the spotlight, performing for large audiences, yet he had chosen to retreat, playing now for the sheer joy of expression, without seeking recognition or applause. The audience grew more attentive, their curiosity heightened. Some whispered about recognizing certain melodies, while others focused on the emotion rather than the technical skill. The piano spoke to everyone differently, touching each person in a unique way. As the performance progressed, the man's hands moved faster, creating a cascade of notes that were both thrilling and emotional. The music carried moments of excitement, joy, and melancholy, drawing the audience into the story he told without words. Guests felt a mixture of awe and serenity, unable to look away or leave. The rain outside had stopped, leaving a gentle coolness in the air, yet inside, the warmth of the music filled every corner of the lobby. Some guests quietly wiped tears from their eyes, overcome by the beauty and depth of the experience. The man seemed unaware of the effect he had on those around him. He played as if in a private world, entirely absorbed in the music, and yet his gift reached everyone present. A few guests whispered to each other that they had never experienced anything like this in their lives. The atmosphere felt sacred, almost as if time had paused, allowing everyone to share a moment that belonged entirely to the music. The melodies became softer now, more introspective, giving space for reflection. Listeners felt as though they could hear the thoughts and emotions of the man, pieced together from the music itself. Each note was deliberate, yet natural, as if it had been waiting to be played for years. Guests felt emotions they had long buried, resurfaced memories of loved ones, distant places, moments of joy and sorrow, all tied together in the piano's voice. The child sitting on the floor reached out a tiny hand, as if to touch the music itself, and her mother smiled gently, letting her be absorbed in the experience. Some older guests whispered in recognition of certain melodies, fragments of songs from long ago that had been forgotten, now revived in the man's hands. The crowd remained respectful and silent, yet the shared connection grew stronger with every note. It became clear to everyone that this performance was extraordinary, something far beyond a simple talent display. The man's skill was undeniable, yet it was the emotion, the story, and the sincerity that held everyone's attention. Even those who had not considered themselves lovers of music found themselves captivated. The performance was no longer just about sound. It had become a shared experience, a quiet communion among strangers, brought together by the piano and the man who played it. Some guests whispered that they felt they had been given a rare gift, one that would remain in their hearts forever. The music rose in intensity again, bringing a rush of energy to the audience. Fast, joyful passages filled the lobby, followed by slower, more contemplative sections. It was as though the man was taking everyone on a journey, one filled with emotion and meaning that could not be expressed in words alone. The hotel manager watched quietly, a mixture of curiosity and admiration on his face. He could not recall ever seeing someone command attention in such a quiet yet profound way. The man's hands moved with effortless skill, and yet it was the feeling behind the notes that captivated everyone. Each chord seemed to speak of experiences, struggles, and joys that had shaped him. The audience could feel the depth of his journey without knowing anything about his life. The music carried weight, beauty, and truth, drawing each person into its world. Guests remained completely silent, letting themselves be carried away by the melodies. Some held each other's hands, others closed their eyes, and some simply stood still, letting the music speak to them in a way words never could. The child sitting cross-legged on the floor smiled faintly, as if understanding the story being told. The woman holding her close felt the emotion herself, realizing that music could reach deeper than conversation ever could. The man continued to play, effortlessly moving through soft, reflective passages and powerful, dramatic bursts. It was as if he was telling a story without words, one that everyone could understand through feeling alone. Guests felt part of the story, connected by the invisible threads of emotion woven into every note. The music created a sense of unity in the lobby, a shared experience that transcended differences of age, background, or language. Even the hotel staff, who had seen countless performances, were moved, caught up in the magic of the moment. The man finally paused, letting a single lingering note fill the room. The sound resonated through the space, a delicate echo that seemed to suspend time for a moment. People held their breath, not wanting to break the spell. The man slowly lifted his hands from the keys and looked down, calm and introspective. The audience waited, unsure if they should clap or remain quiet, so mesmerized by the performance that they did not want it to end. The music had created a sense of wonder, a moment that felt rare and precious. The man remained seated, quietly absorbing the effect of his performance without seeking recognition. The lobby was silent, filled with the echo of emotions and memories stirred by the piano. Guests whispered softly, acknowledging the impact of what they had just witnessed. The man's presence, simple and unassuming, contrasted with the power of the music, leaving everyone in awe. For some, it was a moment of personal reflection. For others, it was a shared experience with strangers who now felt connected by the beauty of sound. The piano performance was more than music. It was a story, a gift, a bridge between lives and hearts. And as the man prepared to play the next melody, the audience leaned forward, waiting to be carried further into the story he told without words. Knowing they were part of a rare and unforgettable moment, the music in the lobby had reached a point where it felt alive, flowing through every corner and touching everyone present. Guests remained transfixed, holding their breaths, leaning closer, or closing their eyes to fully absorb the emotion carried in each note. The man at the piano played with an elegance that felt effortless, yet it was clear to anyone listening that every movement was the result of years of dedication and practice. His hands moved with precision, gliding over the keys with the ease of someone who had spent a lifetime with music. The soft sound of the rain outside, still present in the background, created a harmony with the piano that made the moment feel even more special. People who had been talking earlier had gone silent, and even those who had been rushing to catch elevators or check into rooms paused, mesmerized. Some whispered to each other, speculating about the man's identity. He could not be ordinary, they thought. Someone with such skill, emotion, and presence must have a history, a story, a life beyond what anyone could see in that simple, unassuming figure. A woman standing near the fountain whispered that she felt she had heard the melody somewhere before, though she could not recall where. A man, wiping a tear from his cheek, nodded quietly, understanding that the music had touched something deep within him, something he had long forgotten. The man continued, letting the piano speak for him, his eyes closed, completely lost in the music. His fingers flew across the keys during fast passages and lingered with grace over slow, reflective ones. Each chord and every pause was deliberate, carrying weight and meaning that the audience could feel but not articulate. The lobby became a world of its own, filled only with the sound of the piano, the soft rustling of the crowd, and the faint patter of rain outside. Guests moved closer without realizing it, forming a circle of quiet admiration, giving space to each other, yet wanting to be near the source of such beauty. The hotel manager, observing from a distance, could not hide his astonishment. He had seen talented performers before, but the man at the piano commanded attention in a way that was quiet yet profound. The music held everyone captive, making them feel part of something rare and extraordinary. A few young musicians staying at the hotel whispered to each other, amazed at the technique and emotion displayed. They had studied music for years, yet the mastery and expression in the man's playing left them awestruck. It was not only skill that impressed them, but the emotion that seemed to flow naturally from the piano. The melodies were at times soft and introspective, at other times bold and uplifting. The music carried through the lobby like a river, touching everyone differently, but leaving none unaffected. People began to notice small details, the gentle way he pressed the keys, the subtle shifts in tempo, the pauses that seemed to breathe with life. Each movement was meaningful, purposeful, and filled with feeling. The crowd grew even larger as more guests entered the lobby, drawn by the unusual quiet and the beautiful sound. Some whispered guesses about who he might be: a retired professional, a traveling musician, perhaps even a famous pianist, choosing to remain anonymous. Yet no one could be certain. The music itself carried the answer, though it was not spoken aloud. The man played on, moving through a complex and layered melody that seemed to tell a story only he fully understood. Each note carried emotion and history, as if the piano were a vessel for memories, joys, and sorrows that had shaped him. Guests felt an intimate connection, as though the music spoke directly to them. Some were reminded of lost loved ones, others of long-forgotten moments of happiness, and a few were simply aware of a deep calm that came from being present in the moment. The child on the floor watched in fascination, captivated by the magic of the sound and movement. Her mother smiled, holding her hand gently, understanding the unspoken bond that music had created. The man's hands moved faster now, a flurry of notes creating excitement and intensity. Yet even in the fastest passages, the music remained controlled and expressive. The audience could sense both power and delicacy, and they felt honored to witness the performance. The piano's voice seemed to carry across the lobby, touching each guest differently. Some felt joy, others nostalgia, and some a sense of longing they could not name. The performance was more than music. It was a gift, a story, and a shared moment of connection that transcended words. As the man played, a woman in the crowd whispered softly to a companion, realizing she recognized the melody. It was familiar, a song that had once been heard in grand concert halls, performed by a world-renowned pianist who had vanished from the public eye years ago. The realization spread quietly among a few guests who had been listening carefully. Murmurs began to rise, but they were soft, filled with disbelief and wonder. The possibility that this simple, unassuming man could be the famous pianist caused a ripple of excitement through the crowd. The hotel manager, noticing the whispers, stepped closer, curiosity piqued. He observed the man at the piano carefully, trying to reconcile the quiet, humble figure with the extraordinary music pouring from his hands. Guests began comparing memories, trying to recall the pianist's face and performances from the past. The woman who first recognized the melody walked closer, her eyes wide with recognition. She whispered to a nearby guest, her voice trembling slightly with excitement. The audience felt a growing sense of anticipation, as if a secret was about to be revealed. The man played another familiar tune, one that only the missing pianist had performed during his final public appearances. Gasps and quiet exclamations spread through the crowd as more people realized the truth. Phones were raised, not to distract, but to capture a moment they knew was historic. The man, still unaware of the growing recognition, continued playing, completely absorbed in his music. His expression remained calm, yet the music itself told the story of someone who had experienced immense joy, deep sorrow, and the complexities of life away from public attention. Suddenly, a young man who had entered the lobby just moments ago rushed toward the piano. His face was full of emotion and urgency. He stopped in front of the pianist and called out his name, a name familiar to many in the crowd. The words hung in the air, and every head turned. Recognition spread quickly. The quiet man at the piano, who had seemed ordinary, was indeed the famous pianist who had disappeared years ago after a personal tragedy. The audience reacted with astonishment, excitement, and admiration. Some guests whispered to each other in disbelief, while others simply stood frozen, overwhelmed by the reality of witnessing a legend in person. The young man, revealed to be the pianist's nephew, had been searching for him for years. He had finally found him playing quietly in a hotel lobby, far from the fame and attention he once knew. The pianist paused, looking up at his nephew, a mixture of surprise, hesitation, and relief crossing his face. The lobby, which had been filled with awe and music, now held a new energy, the anticipation of a reunion, the thrill of recognition, and the warmth of human connection. The man, once known only for his extraordinary talent, had chosen a life away from the spotlight, traveling quietly and sharing his gift without expectation. And now, at this moment, his presence in the hotel lobby had brought together strangers and family alike, all touched by his music and the story that was unfolding before them. Guests whispered in amazement, capturing the reality that the person they had been watching play with such skill and emotion was someone they had only ever heard about in stories, recordings, and concert memories. The piano's voice continued to linger in the room, a testament to the man's life, dedication, and the quiet choices he had made to live simply. The crowd remained attentive, filled with respect, awe, and the joy of witnessing a rare and unforgettable moment. The lobby had changed completely since the man first sat at the piano. What had begun as a simple performance had become an unforgettable experience that drew the attention and hearts of everyone present. The revelation of his identity had left the audience in awe. Whispers ran quietly through the crowd as guests tried to reconcile the humble figure before them with the legendary pianist they had only heard about in stories and recordings. Despite the excitement, the man remained calm, focused entirely on the piano. His fingers moved over the keys, creating a melody that was softer now, more reflective, as if he were sharing a piece of his life with everyone in the room. The nephew stood nearby, watching quietly, full of emotion, understanding that this was a private moment the pianist wanted to share in his own way. Guests felt the intensity of the music, the emotions carrying through each note. The melodies told stories of life and loss, joy and quiet triumphs, without a single word being spoken. Tears were shed quietly by some, smiles appeared on the faces of others, and a deep hush spread through the audience as they listened, feeling the power of the music in their hearts. The man had chosen to live away from fame, traveling quietly, playing in unexpected places, and sharing his gift freely with strangers. This moment was one of those rare occasions, and the people in the lobby felt privileged to witness it. The melody became more introspective, slower, and more emotional. Guests leaned in closer, drawn into the intricate layers of the music. The soft reverberation of each key created a tapestry of sound that filled every corner of the room. Some guests closed their eyes, feeling that the piano was speaking directly to them, reaching places within their hearts that had long been untouched. The young child who had been sitting on the floor reached out to the piano, her small fingers brushing the air as if to touch the music itself. Her mother held her gently, both captivated by the unfolding moment, realizing that something extraordinary was happening. The music grew in intensity once more, bringing energy back into the room. Fast, flowing notes danced across the keys, powerful yet controlled, expressing a life full of experience. The pianist's hands moved with a grace that spoke of years of dedication and love for his art. The audience felt the rhythm in their chests, the emotional flow synchronizing with their own heartbeats. Some whispered to each other, speculating on the journey that had led the pianist here to this quiet hotel lobby. Others remained silent, unwilling to disturb the spell. The nephew, standing near the piano, finally approached carefully, placing a hand gently on his uncle's shoulder. The pianist paused, looking up for the first time, and their eyes met. A quiet understanding passed between them, words unnecessary. The crowd sensed the moment. Reunion not just of family, but of lives intertwined by music and fate. The pianist nodded slightly, acknowledging the connection, and resumed playing, this time a melody that seemed to carry both apology and gratitude. The audience felt the shift in tone, sensing the intimate story behind each note. Guests began to lean forward, drawn not just to the music, but to the unfolding story between the two family members. Some people reached for their phones to capture the moment, while others held back, knowing that no recording could truly capture the depth of what they were experiencing. The music wove through the lobby like a river, carrying memories, emotions, and unspoken words. Each note had a weight and purpose that seemed to communicate more than speech ever could. The pianist moved effortlessly between fast passages and slow, reflective ones, guiding the audience on a journey that touched everyone present. The audience became more attentive, every person present immersed in the music. Some felt joy and happiness, others a quiet melancholy, and many felt both, moving through the complex landscape of human emotion conveyed through sound alone. A woman whispered to her companion that she felt like the pianist was speaking directly to her soul. Another guest nodded silently, tears in his eyes, realizing that the music was telling the story of someone's life, the struggles and triumphs, the love and loss, the moments that define a person. The child who had been watching carefully now clapped softly, breaking the hush and causing a ripple of smiles through the crowd. The pianist's fingers danced lightly across the keys, responding to the energy without breaking the flow of the music. The lobby seemed suspended in time, a quiet sanctuary where strangers were united by sound and emotion. The hotel manager, who had been watching with awe, stepped closer, marveling at the presence and humility of the man, who could have been performing for audiences around the world, but had chosen this quiet existence. The pianist's eyes occasionally lifted, scanning the room briefly before returning to the keys. He played not for recognition, but for connection, for the feeling of sharing something pure with those willing to listen. The melodies became more delicate, filled with subtle pauses that allowed the audience to reflect. The music spoke of experiences lived quietly, away from the public eye, of a life fully felt yet understated. Guests felt their own stories reflected in the music, memories rising to the surface that had been dormant. The rain outside had stopped completely, leaving a soft freshness in the air. Inside, the warmth and richness of the piano music enveloped everyone, creating a cocoon of sound and feeling. The audience became more engaged, leaning in, closing their eyes, letting the music fill them completely. The pianist's hands moved with purpose and elegance, each note carrying intention. Guests could feel the story unfolding, even without knowing the full details of his life. Each chord seemed to represent a chapter, each melody a memory, each pause a reflection. The music became increasingly intimate, almost conversational, as if the pianist were speaking directly to each person in the room. Some guests felt a connection so strong that they could almost sense the life experiences behind every note. Others simply allowed themselves to be carried along, appreciating the beauty and the emotion without needing explanation. The nephew, standing quietly, could sense the depth of his uncle's feelings and the meaning behind the music. He realized that the choice to play here, in this unassuming hotel lobby, was not accidental. It was a statement of humility, of life lived fully and quietly, and of the power of music to reach people in unexpected ways. The audience remained spellbound, caught up in the performance that seemed to suspend reality itself. Each note, each pause, each shift in tempo carried with it a story of human experience. Guests whispered softly to each other, sharing the realization that they were witnessing something extraordinary. The pianist played on, blending melodies of joy and sorrow seamlessly, moving between moments of quiet reflection and bursts of emotion. The child clapped again, softly, her small gestures drawing gentle smiles from those around her. The music flowed like a river, gentle in some parts, strong and commanding in others, and the audience followed without hesitation. The pianist's final notes began to slow, drawing the performance toward a conclusion. The melodies softened, the chords lingered, and the final note held in the air, resonating through the lobby like a heartbeat. Guests remained still, savoring the moment, feeling the weight of what they had just experienced. The man lowered his hands from the keys, finally opening his eyes fully and looking around at the crowd. There was calm in his expression, a quiet satisfaction, a sense that he had shared something deeply personal and meaningful. The audience erupted into soft applause, some clapping gently, others wiping tears from their eyes, all acknowledging the beauty and the significance of the performance. The nephew stepped forward, taking his uncle's hand, and the two shared a quiet, meaningful smile. The crowd sensed the private joy, the reconciliation, and the deep connection of family. Guests remained in awe, speaking in hushed tones, sharing their impressions, realizing that they had just witnessed something extraordinary and rare. The pianist finally stood, nodding to the audience, acknowledging the collective experience without seeking attention or fame. People continued to whisper in admiration, marveling at the talent and humility of the man who had transformed a simple hotel lobby into a place of shared wonder. And as he gathered his bag and quietly moved toward the exit, the audience knew they had witnessed not just a performance, but a story, a life, and a moment that would stay with them forever. The magic of the evening lingered, the memory of the music, and the man who played it echoing in the hearts of everyone who had been present. It was a story that could never be replicated, a moment of human connection and artistry that would remain alive in memory for a lifetime.